and there was some kind of an official response, that maybe that official response hits on October 25th, and that would cause 10 days of anxiety and building tension. There'd be a lot of speculation about what kind of a response would cause that, but it's these kind of in left field or outlying anomalies that are very interesting in our work because manifest. So this October 17th, in your face now, or can you hear us now, or whatever it is, may have a rather shocking and unintended series of consequences that would sort of piggyback from that and take off on the 25th. And they may indeed be of such an order of magnitude that, juxtaposed with the crashing of the dollar or the markets or something, that it all forms this rather interesting 10-day stew of tension.
Well, that falls back into, I think it was Kissinger that said the whole world would come together if we were under attack by space aliens. It's one of their playbooks that they have already written.
Oh, yeah, sure, and that's still on the table. We still show that over these next 18 months or so, the powers that be are going to try and really push their whole control agenda back to where they've got the genie back in the bottle, so to speak. And one of their mechanisms or strategies or tactics involved will be this idea of terrestrial humans versus aliens.
So that could be. And then I know another date you had was, I believe, December 10th.
We've got an interesting situation. On the 29th of December, we have a context change. And it's a planetary context change, unlike the previous one, which was mainly North American. The context change is not like a tipping point. So a tipping point for us is where you have a 9/11 kind of an attack, and nothing is the same on the planet after that point. The whole planet, so to speak, tips over into a new paradigm or world view, and it does it rather rapidly. A context change, even though it is planetary, for us is a different set of emotional movement, if you will. So an example of a context change that came out of nowhere but was a long... the difference really is that a context change involves the materialization of a long maturing or, if you will, a growing trend that appears all of a sudden, whereas a tipping point is a sudden small event that we all kind of trip over, so to speak. So the whole world tripped over the destruction of the towers and the attack on the Pentagon on 9/11. But we had a few years back, we had a context change appear on us rather suddenly, which was the millions of people that were undocumented illegal workers that were marching in trying to get comprehensive immigration reform. And if you kind of think back about it, you can sort of feel the difference in the language that emerged in those two periods. And we have the latter. We have a context change that will come up in December of this year, and we think it'll be between the 10th and the 29th. Now, that's an interesting period, too, because that context change may relate to something as dramatic as, for instance, the announcement that we're going to pull out of Afghanistan or pull out of Iraq suddenly. And that would follow if we indeed have the level of catastrophic impact on the dollar that we suspect will occur. It will not take many months before we won't be able to afford as a nation to continue these wars.
That's perfect. You went right into what I wanted to ask you next, was the how the dollar dies. The way I read the report, you're saying that it's going to first die as a world currency, but it will still be good for several months here in the States?
That's our understanding. That's the trends that are suggested by the language that have been reasonably accurate about such things in the past. The same data sets that yielded our forecast of October 7th of 2008 as being a pivotal day for the global financial system are in use now, and they're pointing to a dollar death and probably is actually being engineered as we are speaking now at this G20 meeting, and we may not find out about it for a while. But basically, the whole globe is going to reject the dollar as a means of doing business. And the real impact will come when the dollar is no longer accepted for commodities. at any level, including the treasuries and other forms of American debt. So that level of impact will be rather sudden and will be hugely felt here in the United States, because it actually will be at a macro shifting level for our society. So if we look at history, we see that the last single kind of a macro shifting level that impacted our society did so in the reverse, and it was at the end of World War II in the great boom years of the early 50s. At that time, America's productive capacity was the equivalent of a large chunk of the rest of the planet. And while we were consuming very handily, because we'd had a period of demand constraint for all of the years of the war, there was also a big demand increase on a planetary scale, and that was the big burgeoning period of the movement outward of our corporation and our corporate mentality around the rest of the planet. That is to speak, in a way, that's to say in a way that our colonization of the rest of the planet, at least at an ideological level, was really accomplished in, say, the first 6 years of the 1950s as a base. It matured through the 60s and so on, but its big impetus was at that point. That level of impact on our society was where it was such that at that point, a single individual male could work at a job in any of the middle class realm and be able to support himself, a wife, and 2 or 3 children without too much in the way of anxiety or trouble about it. And those days were rather heady for the populace, and that was because of our large manufacturing base, our resources and materials, and the fact that our competitors, the Japanese manufacturing base and the German, had been decimated by us, and they had in turn decimated a lot of the other manufacturing situations around the planet. So basically at that point, that was really the heyday of the U.S. dollar at a global level. We were in fact using our surplus to alter the lives of people in Europe and Asia and rehabilitate them, so to speak, in our own image point. So we were really a super functioning empire. Now we're going to see the reverse of that, because what's going to happen is going to be a context change for the dollar that will start at a global level, and all of a sudden, from our viewpoint here in the United States, our purchasing power will start slipping by the day, to the point where we may see, in fact it's predicted that we'll see some level of what we can term hyperinflation in goods and commodities that we really need, including energy at some point, although it may not happen just initially because there is some demand destruction on such things as natural gas and so on. However, coupled with the crash of the food crops, it's not unexpected to think that we're going to see really rapidly scaling food prices here. And that'll be our first sign that the dollar is dying as the global reserve currency. Because, to be honest, the foreigners won't want to ship the food here anymore unless they can be assured that they're going to get real value and no longer get the paper dollar or digital equivalent. And that kind of shock can happen fairly rapidly. I mean, not in the course of a week or 10 days, but over the course of a couple of months, all of a sudden you find yourself, and that is all of a sudden as a social level, the whole nation could find itself in the hyperinflation kind of a mode. The last time we came close was in the 70s, and but that was really spread out a little bit fast or longer than what we expect to encounter this year. And then, of course, the dollar starts dying internally, and that's a whole other kettle of fish.
And then the gold and the silver, you had some really good language about, well, not good, but I mean predictive of what you think is going to happen to gold and silver.
Yeah, that's again, juxtaposed against actual resource analysis. Silver is an interesting metal because we've been destroying it for years. Every time there's all kinds of industrial processes that use silver in basically a non-recoverable form, up until the shutting down of the Kodak plants for all of the various different types of film they had. We had all sorts of silver being flushed globally into a basically non-recoverable form from the tourist industry and from photos. We've also got it in all kinds of contacts. It's in non-recoverable little tiny bits and pieces here. So our general inventory of available silver is eroded just by our industrial base anymore, and it's become an industrial as well as a strategic as well as a monetary metal. And all three of those are going to have a real impact here in a short term, and we think it's going to cause a decoupling of silver to gold in its current ratio of about, I think, 69 or something to 1. And that decoupling may fall down to the historical levels of 12 or 15 to 1, which would be a very rapid rise in silver. Gold would eventually go on to claim higher levels of nominal dollars. And bear in mind that the rise in silver or gold is not a good thing, because it'll be about the same time as the dollar, and it'll be subject to this as well, goes into this hyperinflation and deflation mode at the same point. And so, for instance, when everybody needs to buy food, you'll find electronics get real cheap. The things that people don't really need start falling by the wayside.